Judge Andrew Napolitano is an internet sensation. I have followed him now for years. I've wanted to interview him for years. He also wants to interview me. The judge and I are about to get proper acquainted. He is the host of Judging Freedom. He is really a judge, and he's the wisest man on the bench in America today. Judge Napolitano, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. We have a lot of mutual friends, and we meet at last. Can I start in your country? But I do want your views on the international situation too, which are inextricably linked, of course. I mean, if Kamala Harris loses Michigan, she lost it because of the slaughter in Gaza and now in Lebanon. So these two things can't entirely be separated. But I'm of the firm view now that the big Mo is with Donald Trump. Do you share that view?
But first of all, George, thank you very much for having me on your show. I have longed to interact with you, not only because we have so many mutual friends, but so many common ideas, and you articulate them so beautifully. Some of the highest viewerships I received was when I ran clips of you on the floor of the House of Commons tormenting Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and he couldn't wait until you stopped.
Where is he
we
now?
Ran it over and over again.
Where is he now?
Who the hell knows where he is now? He's probably here in the U.S. Let me also thank you for the statement you just delivered, which was truly a brilliant survey of what's going on around the world through the eyes of the BRICS folks in Kazan, Russia. I commend your analysis. I commend what BRICS is doing, and I rejoice in it. I agree with you on Michigan. Joe Biden has single-handedly caused his chosen successor to lose Michigan. I'm not so sure she will lose the race because the polls are all over the place, but it's almost inconceivable that the state of Michigan, which has the largest population of Palestinian Americans, two of whom are in the House of Representatives, could possibly vote for her. Trump has a lot of assets and a lot of deficits, as you know. I've been a friend of his for 40 years. As you know, he interviewed me twice for the Supreme Court of the United States, which is our highest court. He began the first interview by saying, "Okay, Judge, I know you didn't vote for me." and it proceeded. It proceeded from there. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I'm not as sanguine about Trump winning as you are. However, I do agree with you. I do agree with you on Michigan. The genocide in Gaza, the genocide in Lebanon, the theft of real estate going back to 1948, the apartheid going back to 1948, has been felt most acutely and bitterly in the United States, in Michigan. And that's with the opposition of all the mainstream press that does not want to talk about this. Even my former employer of 24 years, Fox News, does not want to talk about the Zionist horrors. It is only independent venues like yours and mine, and maybe a dozen or so others, that are able to get through to the American public what the mainstream legacy media is keeping from them. So that's my feeling at the moment. Maybe we'll chat again 2 weeks from today, and we'll know who won Michigan, and we'll know who won the presidency.
Yeah, it is a peculiar blind spot that you identify. You've got all these people who said they wanted to make America great again. They wanted to put America first, but they are first in the queue to give away America's money to two countries, Ukraine and Israel, neither of whom have ever contributed anything to America of any good. But the blind spot would appear to bizarrely be a religiously motivated one. The fact that a soldier in the Israeli army peculiarly a Christian soldier, who's been killed and is now buried, has had his headstone covered by a cloth by order of the Israeli state because it had a cross on it. That's what they think of Christians in Israel. They have an ancient tradition, they call it, of spitting on Christians. I've seen them do it in the holy city of Jerusalem, outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus lay and where his blood spread over the stone. I've seen them spitting on Christian pilgrims and nuns and monks. They hate Christianity in Israel, but American Christians sure love them for it.
You know, the donor class, as we call them, the very wealthy Zionists and pro-Zionists here in the U.S. have an iron grip on the American government, no matter who the president is, whether it's Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, or Kamala Harris. They have an iron grip on the Congress of the United States. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu is the chief executive officer of a police state, which is also an apartheid state, which engages in the systematic genocide of the people who occupied the state before his people moved in. It is inconceivable to me that there could be any moral defense of Benjamin Netanyahu, and yet the Congress of the United States of America gave him 58 standing ovations, more than they gave to Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, Douglas MacArthur, or any other American presidents for whom this nonsense about standing ovations was recorded. There's never been a debate on the floor of the House of Representatives or the Senate about all this money to Israel, and yet the United States government has given them so far $20 billion with a B dollars in military equipment at the discretion of the President of the United States. He or she, of course, could stop the slaughter, stop the genocide with a phone call. In Iran, the situation is arguably even worse because the numbers are so much more vast. The United States government has given over, fasten your seatbelts, as George Galloway likes to say, $265 billion with a B dollars in equipment and cash to the Ukrainian government. 600,000 young Ukrainian men are dead, an entire generation. 10 million Ukrainians have left the country. For what? For what? To serve as a battering ram against Russia, to drive President Putin out of office. These are pipe dreams of the neocons, and yet your former prime minister, with whom I know you were extremely adverse, thanks be to God, Boris Johnson, talked then president, no longer, but claiming to be, Vladimir Zelensky, into rejecting a peace agreement that had been negotiated by his people and by the Russians. Don't worry, he said. The UK and the US will have your back. He's hanging on by the skin of his teeth. They're doing everything they can to prop up this government and his military until after November 5th. As recently as yesterday, the American Secretary of Defense was in Kyiv delivering a package of $400 million more dollars worth of military equipment. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but the most useful artillery shell is the 155 millimeter shell. The U.S. has none. The U.S. has totally run out of them. We've given all of them away to Israel and to Ukraine. This is not a national secret. Everybody knows it, including those who wish the U.S. harm and who would take advantage of it. So the foreign policy of Joe Biden has been an unmitigated disaster. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is the worst in modern history. He's a war criminal. He's served as Benjamin Netanyahu's lawyer. I don't mean literally, I mean figuratively. I don't even know if Blinken is a lawyer. Joe Biden is a war criminal. Everybody who has participated in, funded, financed the slaughter of Palestinians is a war criminal. Will they be prosecuted? Probably not.
Taking advantage of your legal eminence, Your Honor, there's an immediate legal question arises in my mind. This leak, famously now being investigated, of Israel's war plan for the attack on Iran, contained the very clear statement that Israel is a nuclear weapons power.
Yes.
The fact that these nuclear weapons have never been declared, never been inspected, and are, on the face of it, denied, is belied by this leak from the United States government, which clearly talks about Israel's nuclear weapons. Now, if I'm not wrong, your law precludes giving money and weapons and diplomatic support to a state which has illegally acquired nuclear weapons, which is not a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Agreement, which is not allowing its assets to be inspected by the appropriate international inspectorates. This seems to me a clear breach of American law. Is there nothing can be done about that?
Let me say first that your summary of American law is absolutely correct, George. And your observation of what was revealed on those leaked documents is absolutely correct. Anybody can read them. They're on the internet and they're in English. They reveal the American intelligence community spying on Israel and speaking in a very matter-of-fact way about something that everybody in the American government, in the federal government, in the executive branch knows is true, and that is that Israel has nuclear weapons. What they don't realize is that Israel stole the nuclear technology from the United States while the U.S. was looking the other way. In other words, we allowed them to steal it because of this peculiar relationship between Israel and the U.S. I say peculiar. They're not an ally. We have no treaty. They're not a friend. They attacked one of our warships in 1967, and they bleed us dry of the aid that we give them. They give us nothing in return but heartache and violation of international law. There is a unique feature in the American Constitution called standing, which basically prohibits individuals from suing the federal government for violating federal law unless those individuals have uniquely been harmed. The courts would basically say, if you don't like what Joe Biden is doing, impeach him or vote him out of office. Don't expect us to restrain him. It shows you that many American laws that would, if enforced, be adverse to Israel are toothless, were enacted at a time when they were known to have been toothless, are just a charade and would only be enforced against other countries like Iran, the great Satan, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu. So I'm sorry for the long answer, but the short answer is nothing can be done in the courts. It can only be done at the ballot box.
Well, sticking with legal matters, again, taking advantage of your expertise, you've got a constitution. I commend you for it. We have no constitution ourselves, and therefore no amendments to it. But the very first amendment, and I presume it's called the First Amendment for a reason, because of its preeminence, because without it, none of the other parts of the Constitution are of very much use. But your First Amendment would now appear to be being observed more in the breach than anything else. You now have a situation where not only did you move mountains to try and get Julian Assange into the hands of the U.S. justice system on extremely dubious legal grounds, and a very bad look when he was one of the world's most eminent journalists. I've just left Julian's father half an hour ago. He's here in Kazan, but your authorities seem to be swooping on friends of mine almost on a weekly basis. They are taken off airplanes, their passports are sequestered, their outfits are closed down, they are rendered. In the same way that in this country, when it was the USSR, dissidents would publish their samizdat pamphlets out in the woods somewhere because the state would not allow them freely to speak. It's like the tables have turned, Judge, that we who used to call ourselves the land of the free are now shredding every freedom for which our fathers fought.
I'm sorry to say that again. I agree with you, George. It's a terrible state of affairs. The United States has become what it once condemned. The United States once condemned in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even into the Reagan years in the 80s, the punishment of speech and the suppression of speech in the old Soviet Union. It has now perpetrated that here in the United States. I think your references to taking off planes and passports seized might be to our dear great mutual friend Scott Ritter, whose home was invaded by 40 FBI agents, including a SWAT team in full military gear and a bomb squad in full bomb gear looking for an iPhone. 40 FBI agents and a bomb squad and a SWAT team looking for an iPhone and two desktops. So the American government, every one of whose employees, from the president down to a janitor in a federal building, have taken the same oath I did when I became a judge, which is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. But unfortunately, those in whose hands we repose the Constitution for safekeeping have not been faithful to it. American presidents start their own wars, like Joe Biden in Ukraine and Joe Biden in Gaza, without a declaration of war by the Congress. The Congress can't declare war on Russia. Russia poses no threat to the United States. It can't declare war on Ukraine, on Iran. Iran poses no threat to the United States. So rather than following the Constitution, they just give the president all the money he wants to spend and let him spend it however he chooses. This is profoundly violative of the Constitution, and has led to the commission of these war crimes. Is there a legal remedy? If you don't mind me asking myself a rhetorical question, the short answer is probably not, for the reason that I articulated to you. This clause of the Constitution, which divests federal courts of jurisdiction unless the plaintiff has been harmed uniquely, not in common with everybody else, but uniquely, will keep these issues from being aired in a federal court. They can only be aired in the ballot box. And what good is the ballot box? In America, it almost doesn't matter who's the president or which party controls Congress. It's a pro-war party. It's a pro-surveillance on everyone party. It's a pro-debt party. On those three issues, war, debt, warrantless surveillance, 95% of the members of Congress agree from both parties. There are some wonderful progressives on the left and some wonderful libertarians on the right who disagree, but it's 95-5. It's like you in the House of Commons, vastly numerically outnumbered, not morally outnumbered, numerically outnumbered.
Some have begun to theorize on this question, calling for a rewriting of the Constitution, which most people abroad imagine that you worship your Constitution almost like tablets of stone. And yet I've heard John Kerry and Hillary Clinton theorizing recently in the last few weeks that actually this First Amendment is now harmful to the United States and should be dispensed with, or at least severely amended. Does that have any legs? Would someone get away with that kind of rewriting of the Constitution?
Well, it's an awfully, the short answer is I don't think so. it's an awfully cumbersome task. It requires a ratification by 2/3 of each House of Congress and then 3/4 of the legislatures of the states. James Madison, whom George III considered a traitor, but James Madison, who wrote the Constitution, intentionally made it difficult to amend. I'm sorry to say that even our friend President Trump wants to amend the First Amendment so as to permit the Congress to criminalize flag burning. He wants to amend the Fifth Amendment, which guarantees due process, so as to permit the police to administer punishment at the scene of a crime, depending upon the discretion of the arresting officer. Vice President Harris is in favor of killing babies up to the moment of death, even though the 14th Amendment guarantees life, liberty, and property cannot be taken without due process. So the trivial ways in which the Constitution has been assaulted, in my view, will not go anywhere. However, George, they establish an attitude, an atmosphere whereby the legislative branch, the Congress, the executive branch, the president, the judicial branch, judges, begin not to take the words of the Constitution seriously and begin to impose their own looser, weaker understanding of it. Do I expect that these things will actually happen? That flag burning would become a crime, where the police could beat you at the scene of a crime? You don't have to have the wrong person. No. But you'll see some small steps in those directions.
Well, you didn't vote for him last time, Your Honor. Will you vote for him this time? I'll tell you why I ask. I talk regularly with Colonel McGregor. I've now been fortunate enough to talk with you, and enormously impressed, as the whole audience, I'm looking at the commentary coming in, has been. McGregor and you in Trump's administration would be a gigantic step forward from the swamp that he surrounded himself with last time out. Any chance of you in office?
That would be entirely up to him. He and I discussed that many times in his prior administration. He's made some very flattering comments about what he wishes he had done since he left office. The thought of Doug McGregor as Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense is so pleasing, so morally, ideologically, mentally, constitutionally pleasing. It's almost overwhelming. If asked to serve in the government, it would be difficult for me to say no. Be able to serve side by side with Doug McGregor would be a gift from the heavens.
It would be a gift to the world from the heavens, not just the United States. Your Honor, I'm deeply grateful for your time. I'm sorry it's on a long-distance call from Russia. I hope that doesn't put you in any difficulty. And I look forward to talking with you again after the polls, and probably, most likely, on your show rather than mine. I thank you kindly, sir, for a dazzling interview. Thank you.
It would be my pleasure, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, George. Thank you so much, my dear friend.